Hi, welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited for this conversation today with Kristine Beese from Untangled Money. She's going to tell us all about her entrepreneurial journey and all the cool things that Untangled Money does. And I'm curious to pick her brain a little bit more about the origin story and her passion for helping women manage their finances. So let's jump in. Kristine, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Megan. Thanks for having me on the show.
My pleasure. I really loved from the get-go your initiative, and I'd love to understand sort of the catalyst, the origin story. Was this always something that you were really passionate about? You saw that there was a gap that needed to be filled, and at what point did you think that has to be me that does the work?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't set out to start doing this. I actually started as an engineer in oil and gas and I made lots of money. And I didn't love oil and gas. It's not what I studied, but that's where the jobs were and I was becoming restless and I went to the bank to help me with the money that I had made. And I went there because I didn't know what to do and I thought they could help me and it just felt like a giant sales pitch. The gentleman, was really condescending. He didn't answer my questions, and I felt really small. And I
Mhm.
didn't think this is a problem. I just thought, maybe there's something wrong with not me because I was pretty sure I could figure it out, but maybe I was meant to come differently prepared, or I don't know. I thought maybe I can learn how to do money myself, right? So I started reading lots of books. That ended up being a career transition. I did my MBA. I spent a year on Canada's largest trading floor, and then I became a stock analyst at RBC, looking at international oil and gas companies out of their London, England offices. And that was great. And then I became a mom and I went from being this sort of high potential employee to just kind of being there. I really felt this loss of like any sort of recognition for any of the, it seemed again more like a hassle. Like I just had to reprove why I belonged. And then we moved back to Canada and I had done some work in the finance space, but it was my friend who came to me and said, I'm thinking of leaving my partner. I don't know if I can afford it. Can you help? And I went back to that first conversation that I had with the bank and thought, yeah, there's an issue here. And as we dove in, at first we just thought, and I speak in the royal we just thought, hey, maybe it's about just an educational process, right? Like maybe people just need to get up to speed and all the information's out there. Maybe we just need to put it in a nice order for them. And so that's kind of what we pitched to venture capitalists. And they kept saying, why women, why women, why women? And and so we were like, well, I don't know why women, right? Like, what is it? And then so we ended up finding actually data. And I know this doesn't show up well on the podcast, but I want to share it. It just shows that women over the course of their lifetimes earn a lot less money. Their salary curves are significantly different. And it was Bank of America who published this. I don't think it was their data, but they published this. And it shows that women on average, everyday women who've, graduated from some sort of post-secondary education earn about $1 million less over the course of their lifetimes. And, at this point I was investing money professionally for rich people. And I looked at that chart and said, if I have $1 million less coming in, that really changes the strategies that I can use for women to help them reach their goals because I have less resources. So then I need to use time and performance to my advantage. And so women have lots of time. We live a long time, but the performance part is interesting because of the way the industry focuses on near-term risk and not on lifetime risk. Anyway, so there was all these things that sort of brought me here. And I realized there was a huge gap. So eventually it did become about this passion to help everyday women navigate their finances in a way that didn't feel crappy, right? That didn't make them feel worse, which I think I did feel worse when I went to the bank. I didn't really feel heard. I didn't feel understood. I didn't feel supported. And I want women to have an opportunity to learn the things they need to know in a way that isn't shameful or judgmental. And then there's a lot of implied judgment in finance. So it was it was a lot of things that kind of brought us to where we are today, but it was a real journey and discovery in learning so much about, I was educated in the finance industry by, I did my CFA level 1 and 2, and, the Canadian securities course and all these things. And I never learned about this anywhere else. So it's really hard for an industry to change if nobody's aware of it, and they're not listening. We've sort of shopped this to all the big banks. And so if we want to help women, we're going to have to go to the women themselves.
Okay. Well, I really want to dive. There's so many things I want to pull on there, but I want to dive into what Untangle Money actually does do and how it works. But first, let's go back a little bit there. What do you think, or, it's kind of the chicken and the egg. Are women to some extent, because we're being socialized this way, kind of self-selecting out on being experts on finances? Or do you think it's like a very active strategic thing that the patriarchy doesn't want women to understand all of the options they have in terms of exit strategy, investments, all of these things?
I think it's both. I think we are, and I don't even think, on the first case, research shows that literature targeted towards women is about budgeting, stretching your dollar, and giving your money away to social causes and your community. Literature targeting men is all about generational wealth, building a legacy, and aspirational, like buying expensive things. Like you can buy the Rolex watch, right? It's all about these aspirational things. So those are two very different money messages, and I think they're at polar opposite ends of the spectrum. But what we also know from research is that women and men have very similar financial literacy levels. Men are just slightly ahead of us, but not significantly so. Like it's like 80 to 83%, let's say. Actually, let's put it lower because neither of us are doing great. Men do a lot more, but they do it without a lot of knowledge, and that's also dangerous. But women recognize that they don't have as much knowledge. But both are medium. Where the big gap is that women don't have the same confidence as men. Women have, even we, a lot of times women come to us and say, I just need someone to tell me I'm doing this right. And we're like, you're doing it right. You're doing all the things right. Right? Like, you're doing great. But they're just not confident. And this is not a money thing, but one of my favorite things about our process is at one point we ask you what you like about yourself. And one of our testers or early clients, I guess, said to us, I don't think I've ever been asked that before. There are so few spaces in this life that women are actually asked to reflect on what they actually like about themselves. And so similarly with our money, women are great with money. That's what the research shows. We're better at saving and we're better at investing than our male counterpoints. And I put that out there because something like 90% of women think men are better than money than women are. And women are so great with their money. They just need the confidence and support and that foundational level to get them up the curve. And that's where we feel there's a miss. And that's where we want to play. We don't invest your money. We just help you understand it. And we help you figure out what works best for you. So, do you want to put money away now so you have a comfortable retirement? Great. Do you want to spend all your money now and you're happy working later? Great. Like we really don't care. We want you to have, you just have to figure out how to make it work. But whether it's now or later, that is inconsequential. So I think that's also hard to find, right? I think when we go for help, or when we do try and have help, like with that gentleman that I spoke to at the bank, it just made me feel bad. And I wasn't doing anything wrong yet. I was 20 years old and looking to figure out how to money. What do I do with my money, right? Like, but he made me feel bad. So
yeah, I think it's so. I mean, thinking back to 20 plus years ago when I was in my 20s, I don't think I really saw it as in anything other than like that was just how the way things were, that men were condescending, like older men were kind of condescending to younger women about whatever it is, but especially these certain realms. And I love that you point out that we are better at making investments, better at budgeting, like all of these things. And that's true as well as female founders, right? Like we're a better investment for VC or for angel investors. And I think that narrative is changing. And I love that you're, part of this movement.
Yeah.
And I'd love if you could talk a little bit about the community aspect of Untangle Money. Like I believe, or last time we spoke, there's, you can get more personalized support, but then also it's feeling that you're not alone in
Yeah.
this journey.
Well, it's really interesting because we know community is so important to women, and we know that community is hard to find in subjects that are taboo. So, for instance, I think I'm probably in a similar age group, but I'm experiencing perimenopause at the moment, and I'm really looking for other women who are going through the same thing to leverage their learning, to share my knowledge and learning. But we actually don't see that happening with money. So we've tried several different initiatives. One that we will be bringing back is we just have an open ask me anything, sort of office hours where you can sign up. You have to sign up because otherwise, if no one signs up, I don't show up. But
Fair enough.
you sign up and you can listen. I'm happy to talk for the hour about any topic. I just love the sound of my voice. Not really, but I just, I'm happy to fill the space. But you can also just listen. And so many of the conversations we have are so similar between, and people don't know that, but I'll have the same conversation with, 30 different people. And I just think, man, if you just knew each other existed, you probably feel a lot better because we're all struggling, and so we focus on middle income. So everyday women, which means if you're not an accredited investor, which means you earn less than $200,000 a year, or you don't have, at the very lowest end, probably $300,000 in investable assets. So you could write a check to someone for $300,000 and they'll manage that money for you. If you don't have those two things, you're in our bucket, right? And I know that doesn't even sound like everyday people, but that's when the wealth management industry kicks in. That's who they service. That's who I used to service, right? That's who I used to work with. So everybody else, we're kind of stuck in this free financial literacy and bank branches space, and and FinTalk and this, and that's not necessarily always the easiest to navigate. So we really want to find a community of women. We really want to talk about money, but we've struggled in all our attempts at it. So whichever one we were speaking about before likely didn't work. But it doesn't mean we're stopping. It just means we haven't figured out what works. So if anybody out there is listening and has an idea for how we could build community around money, it would be really great. It seems to be sort of one to many is what's working on like FinTalk or TikTok, like in the FinTalk space yet, or, these sort of financial literacy experts, or I guess personal finance experts, and then they get feedback from their audiences, but the audience members themselves aren't really interconnecting. It's sort of hub and spoke. And so it's a really interesting conundrum, especially for women who do find so much comfort in community. But I actually think it speaks to the amount of shame and fear of judgment that we have about our money choices. Because I had one girlfriend who's like, I'm going to do my mini, but I'm going to wait. And then, so she's like, okay, so then we waited a couple months and she did it. And I was like, why did we wait? And she's like, well, I was redesigning my flat and I didn't want you to say I couldn't afford it. I was like, but we don't do like that. That isn't what we do. Right. We actually don't judge anything. We just want to give you, but she just didn't want, she's like, I want to do this and then I'll figure out the money part. And I, I just wished she could have told me that earlier, and I could have said, well, we're not going to shame you for that or judge you for that or tell you can't afford it, because it's important to you. And if we can't find joy and do what's important to us with our money, what's the point?
Yeah. Do you think that shame comes mostly, is that a Canadian cultural thing? Is that more specific to women?
Yeah. There's a great book that was written called Why Women Are Poorer Than Men. It's by, I usually have a copy somewhere, but I don't see it right now. It's written by Annabelle Williams, who's from the UK. And she says, first she says, around the world, on every data point used to measure poverty and wealth, women fare worse than men from cradle to grave, which is so powerful. But she also talks about how we judge women's spending, right? So I put this on X or whatever it's called now, Twitter. And someone came back and they said, well, craft beer isn't frivolous. And I was like, exactly. It's seen as a male spend, and therefore nobody calls it frivolous. But if you were going to spend the same amount of money on your nails, people would all of a sudden had a lot of things to say about that. So a woman can spend on male items, like masculine spending. Again, I'm really broad strokes here, but those are judged as discerning. That's why beer can be crafty at all, right? Whereas you think about, right, that's why it can have a sense of discernment. Whereas, I really like what's happening I'm not a nail person, but the level of artistry and expression that's happening in the nail space is really interesting, but no one talks about it being curated or, it's beer
art.
on one
Yeah.
hand, and like this is craftsman, like this is art, this is creativity, this is like generative creative, like communal processes advancing the way our nails look at versus I just between the two, I think which one is more discerning. I think, well, maybe I'm using a woman's lens, but
Right. Well, I think we could have a whole conversation about
and I like
nails.
craft beer
I
too.
mean, nail in relation to it being considered self-care and sort of boosting of confidence and all the sort of positive things it does,
Yeah.
which arguably craft beer with alcohol in it, we have a whole
Yeah,
different
yeah.
conversation.
I love your stance on alcohol. We limit our drinking quite a bit, and it just came out of COVID. It didn't feel great, and we didn't have a lot of other people to do it with, and so we kind of. I know you've talked about it, kind of like society, sort of. It's in the water, and when you remove that, you're sort of like, oh, I feel better without it. So we've kind of gotten there on our own. But I really loved your casts that address it. You mentioned it a couple times, so.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think I've really shared this publicly yet, but what the heck? I have one app that I particularly love just for fun that I track my sober days or months or years or whatever, but it also tracks how much time and money I've spent.
Yeah.
Based on, I think it's a pretty conservative, and it doesn't have inflation based on me spending $30 on average a day, which back in the day, easily I would spend $200 a weekend on going out or drinks or whatever. So yeah, in 6.5 years, I've saved like $75,000 and 6 months of time that I used to spend on average. And that was just time I would be seated drinking or hanging out drinking, not the time I would spend being hungover or like not feeling my best or like sleeping off or all those things. So, I mean, it's a massive impact, but
well, that's amazing. And I just want to point out that one of the things that we do is we break things down for every hour that you work. And this was based on Ellen Roseman. She's an amazing Canadian financial thought leader. And she did it after tax and after deductions. She's like, figure out your after. And so we took it a step farther because we are like, well, you have to do we call it committed money, the money you've committed to spending before you've gone out of bed. In accounting, you would call that fixed costs. So you have to pay for those anyway. So it could be rent, but could be Netflix, right? So we take all that away. And then we say, okay, we look at retirement and like retirement savings and what you have to spend. And whatever you determine you want to put away towards retirement to some degree, we take that away. And then we break what's left over down for every hour that you work. And the average Ontario woman in 2019, so that was the last census that came out, had $4 for every hour that she worked that she could spend on food, clothes, gifts, all the things and everything else. And we've had a lot of inflation since then. So it is hard to, maybe that's, who knows, it might be $7 now, but we'll have to wait for the next numbers to come out, or I could run them, but it's not a lot. And so when you think about that Netflix subscription, if you're getting 4 hours worth of joy from it a month, great, brilliant, great, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Similarly, if you get that from going out and your personal way of going out is socializing and having a few drinks, if that's worth it to you, amazing, right? Great, great, great. What we know from the research is that if you don't find joy from that spending, you will go into debt because we revenge spend. Similarly, the reason I say we know how much you can afford to put towards retirement. And sometimes we tell people to put less. We're like, you're going to have to change how you retire because we know you need a certain amount of money. That's what the research shows, to spend on yourself and on all those things. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. And it's research based. So there's maybe monks at one end of the tail of the belt, the distribution, and overspenders at the other. But the researchers said they were so surprised by how many people were right in that middle. So it's 18 to 22% of the money that comes into your bank account every month or however often you're paid You need to spend that money on food, clothes, gifts, all the things, and find joy. You have to find joy. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So that was really neat to be able to point to research and say, it's not our, like, we don't even think that. We just, and it's not about frivolous spending or anything. It's about fulfilling a need within yourself, that, and satiating, and something that makes all of the other stuff worth it. And one of the things I'm proudest of is women who go through our program and have high levels of financial anxiety see a 30% reduction. And,
Wow.
financial wellness, just like you go to your doctor every year, you should check in with your money once a year and just make sure, we change as people. But we also want to make sure it's a sustainable plan, and that it actually is realistic and isn't going to set you up for failure. And I think a lot of the advice that we get from, it's kind of like dieting, right? Like a lot of this stuff is meant well because they're focused on one aspect, or meant because it's easy. I guess not always meant well in the diet space, but it's not sustainable. It's not something that you can't eat bananas for 3 years solid. It's not going to work. I don't know.
Yeah. Or what I've been talking about lately is how many women are afraid to eat fruit. I'm like,
Why? Really?
It's fruit. Like,
Oh, I wouldn't. Really? I didn't know that was a thing. Oh, that
well, because we've
stinks.
been
It's so
told
good
it's
for you.
carbs and carbs are evil, et cetera, et cetera.
Ah,
But like you said, it's not sustainable. I
yeah,
mean, there's a reason that nature has fruit that we.
yeah. Well, I used to
Well, I
be.
love that you talk about financial wellness and sustainability and kind of checking in and ensuring that joy. I talk about joy being on the calendar as a wellness coach, and you're talking about it needs to be on the budget. I
Yes,
love it.
yes. It has to be aligned. It has to be there. We don't function without it. And I recognize. I know there's a lot of your audience probably has a lot of moms in it. There are the do it all years where there's not enough money to go around, and so just with grace, understand that you can always make it work. It might just look differently than you had hoped, or you can just manage your expectations, and then that way, if there's upside, brilliant, and if there isn't, you know what you're in the driver's seat, right? And you're taking yourself to a place that is realistic and will feel good with time.
Yeah, I love that. What are women saying that are working with you?
It's great. We hear most often, it's, I wish I'd done it earlier. It's transformational in the sense that I just didn't know that about money, and that they have a clear path forward. They know what their next steps are, and they know how to, they feel like they have the tools to get to retirement. They know how to get there. They know what they need to do. So that's been wonderful. Can I share
Yeah, I
one of
think
our
there's actually a
struggles?
lot of, as I'm talking to you, there's a lot of similarities in that the women I work with, there's just a lot of sticky energy. It's like they know what they should do, like go talk to someone about their finances,
Yeah.
but like just avoid it because they know it's not going to be comfortable. But you know,
But if you don't know about Untangle, then you're going to go to some,
dang,
condescending, and
Instacart was a
it doesn't have to be a man, right? Like I learned judgmental rules around what you were supposed to do with your money. It was a user who came to me and said, I was so proud because she was, it was really hard to get her plan to work, and this was when we were still, figuring out how to build something that a person could do themselves. And I was so excited. I was like, I figured it out. Here, look, this is your plan. And she looked at it. She's like, that sounds awful. I don't want to live like that. And I was like, wait, what about the grasshopper and the ant, or like whatever, the three little pigs, right? Like all these things that we're told you're supposed to do. I have a Northern European background, and I think, that's very much embedded in, like, you do the hard work and then, you stop afterwards, but that's a value system, right? And so I
right.
said, oh, well, crap, like, okay, well, do you mind working later? She's like, I don't think I'll ever stop working. I'm like, okay, do you think you could live with roommates? Because we see this Golden Girls trend globally. It's around the world.
Mhm.
Women rent or buy abodes with their friends to help lower their costs. And she's like, sounds like a blast. And I was like, what about like a part-time job? She's like, I would love to work in a coffee shop. Love it, love it, love it. And I was like, okay, well, then you don't have to save for retirement now. You can spend all your money, but you have to manage your expectations. You're going to have to work until you're 72. You're going to have roommates when you graduate, retire. and you're going to need a part-time job after that for about 5 to 10 years. And she's like, awesome. And I learned a ton through that because, I was judging her for but the plan I
Assuming.
put into place was judging her for not wanting to do that, right? Like there was an implied judgment. And, thank you to her for saying, hey, that sounds terrible. I don't, right? And so I think when you're the woman sitting there and thinking, well, I don't want to go and they're going to shame me because I do my nails. Like that happened to me the first time I went to my dad's financial advisor. He's like, because at that time I did do my nails. I worked in the service industry, so I was a waitress, and I'm like, I have to have my nails done by contract, right? It's written into my contract that you have a certain visual grooming standard, right? But he's like, that's such a waste of money. No wonder the woman that's there doesn't want to go get help, because she's just going to be shamed, judged, and then condescended to, right? Like, and even if she talks to a woman, women are better at talking to women, generally speaking. That's research done by Merrill Lynch that shows that. So if you do need help, try and find a woman. It's not universally true, not all women, but they are generally better at having those conversations. But no wonder she doesn't want to go get help. It's an awful experience. And we see women, like, they poke their heads out and then they don't do it for another number of years. And then they kind of like, has anything changed? Nope, still shitty, like I'll worry about this tomorrow. So, we think we've been conditioned to not look at our money because, one, we're told it's not for us. And then two, when we go and find help, it's an awful experience. So why would we keep engaging? Right. So one of the things that the biggest problem we have is one of our investors asked her sister to do it for us because she was not our client base. She's in the financial literacy space as well. So her sister did it, and her sister said, that was the best thing I've done. Like, she used the word transformational. She's like, that was incredible. I never would have done it if my sister hadn't made me. And that is our problem. That is like the crux of what we have to still figure out, is how do we help women with grace and gentle prodding understand that this experience, I'm not going to say it doesn't suck at all, because there are things in it it can be hard to hear, but it works. You feel better afterwards, and it doesn't suck in that, the things like judging and shaming and welcoming and kindness and optionality. Those things are great. The part that stinks is we're middle income, and it's hard. There's a lot of things we want and not a lot of money to do it with, and we have to make some tough trade-offs. But that's better. I think it's better to consciously and intentionally make those trade-offs than end up somewhere not realizing you were making choices all along and now you're here, right? Consciously and intentionally. And so that intentionality of spending your money with joy, right? It's way better to buy Netflix for 1 month than it is to buy it for the year and only use it 30% of the year, right? It's much better to spend those $20 doing something else on the months when you're not focused on Netflix. I have a funny story about Simply Piano, but we can go into that later.
So. Well, yeah. I mean, again, I hear so many similarities with work that I do, and that
I agree.
There are only certain amount of things that you actually have total agency over.
Yeah.
So why not have crystal clarity and decide what you're actually going to implement, and then conscious feel like, yeah, no, that's not for me. I'm not going to do that. It's not worth it to me.
Yeah.
And I love, again, back to the joy piece. There's a big difference between feeling bad about spending money on yourself for a decade, whether that's your nails or whatever, versus like, yeah, no, that's my joy spend, and fully and consciously embracing and in that moment getting the joy out of it versus feeling guilty.
Yeah. And we almost want you to focus more on what brings you joy and try and get everything else free or cheap, right? That's sort of ideal. And research shows that if we're focused on intentionally spending, we tend to spend less. It's kind of like eating. If you're focused on eating delicious foods, you're probably not grabbing crap, right? Like, because your next meal is going to be amazing, right? So it's kind of, we see a lot of parallels there. And I think that, again, when coming back to the woman and why she might not want to do this is, I think, a financial plan costs thousands of dollars. So you kind of get one and done. But we as humans are constantly changing and evolving. So that's why we made it $150, so you can do it every year, because your endpoint and your values are going to change. So I can share that when I was in my 20s, I really liked fancy coffee, and it demarcated the end of being a student. I felt like it took me seriously. I felt like a professional. I was, it really floated my boat. Like it lifted me up in the morning. And now I drink instant decaf, right? Like these things change. And so what brings you joy is allowed to change. But I think because we had this, the previous paradigm was this expensive plan, it also feels like you can't go back and redo it. And it feels like it's stale and feels like you have to stay this way forever. And the nice thing is, this is a flexible solution that can grow and change with you over time, because we know we all as humans probably are going to grow and change over time, and that is allowed and to be celebrated. And so the things that we spend our money on are going to be different. Where we find joy is going to be different. Where we, to some degree, maybe the type of retirement we want is going to be different. And that one's a little trickier because you do have to sort of decide earlier how much option you want. But, there's lots of ways to make that work. So
I love that. I love everything you shared today. So what's the best way? I mean, we'll share the website, which is awesome. Is there other specific ways you want people to reach out or look into working with you?
yeah, so we're running a crowdfunding campaign for the month of November, which is in the year 2024. But, coming in the new year, we'll have that app in market. And so you can purchase that through our website. We'll have those office hours back in usually during lunch hour, and we have one in the evening usually as well. So you can pop by, just ask questions. We have a free 15-minute session if you just want to find out more, and you can walk through a demo. We'll have a demo in the market in early December. So you'll be able to go through Sandra's journey. And then that way you can see what we would do for Sandra. And then you can say, do I want this done for myself? Because I think women really want to, try it out, right? We try on clothes. We really like that, to like test it out before we purchase. And I think that's really smart because we have less money to spend on things. So we want to be a bit more cautious about where we put that spend. So those are some things that are coming out. We're going to be on social media, Instagram, at Untangle Money, but and then I'm mainly on LinkedIn. So that's the one I do myself. I don't do my own social media because I can't stop scrolling. So if I get on it, that's my day done. So I get help with that. But they let me know when people reach out. They'll give you my contact information. I just have to put some boundaries and protect my brain and
wise. Wellness approved.
Yes, exactly.
I get it. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and all the incredible ways that women are actually in a better position to nail this. And reaching out and getting some curated help, I think, is one of the wisest things that we can do moving forward. I wish things like this existed when I was in my 20s, and I'm just really optimistic that there's more and more things for women that make money talk less taboo.
And one of the best things you can do for the women that you love is buy it for them, because just like my investor's sister, this is something that's hard for them to do and to feel like they want to allocate money to. So if you're a parent of a young adult, we do couples. Half of our clients are couples. I just really think you can purchase this on behalf of someone you love, because it's going to be an amazing experience. It's just not necessarily a choice that's easy for them to make on their own.
Yes, I love that you pointed that out. Christmas gifts coming up.
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
Beautiful. Well, we'll be in touch and we'll share all of those things that we mentioned in the show notes. And thanks again, Kristine.
Thanks for having me, Megan. This was amazing.
We'll be in touch. Thanks again.